This time on Heavy Pedal Garage, it's cold outside. So we're holed up here in the garage, got the heat on, trying to keep this place warm, and we're gonna work on this passenger side. And it's been worked over once. The first round of body work's been done. So today we're gonna block it down. We're gonna try to see where we're at and maybe use a little bit of filler to smooth things up a little bit more, refine it just a little bit further. The other thing I'm gonna do is talk a little bit about the different types of sanding grits and when I've used which grit and which one works best for what type of job. So we're also gonna fix up a few other little imperfection areas. One of them being this little transition right here. I've got a little bit of a dip in the corner of this door panel that I'm not happy with, and the way it lines up with the fender is going to take a little bit of weld and some body filler to get that straightened out. So if you like this kind of thing, please consider subscribing. Why wouldn't you, right? If you like it, hit that button, follow along as we bring this Firebird back from the dead, and hopefully sometime here in the next several months we're gonna have this thing back on the road. So you're not gonna wanna miss that. Paint, wheels and tires, interior, we're gonna be doing videos on all that good stuff. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like, throw me a comment down there, and we'll catch up with you here in a little bit. So I wanna start off here with some disclaimers, okay? What I'm about to talk about is for a process that I'm using to sort of rebuild and repaint this whole car. If you're just doing a repair job, or if you're not taking the finish down to metal and then bringing it back up, say you're just wanting to do a scuff and reshoot, this sanding grit process is going to be something completely different. And the other disclaimer I want to give you is that you'll find that different grit sandpapers affect different substrates in a different way. So what I'm trying to say here is 80 grit directly on metal is not going to be as aggressive as 80 grit on your body filler. So you're gonna see 80 grit scratches a lot easier in your body filler than you would on bare metal. So a little bit of experience and just paying attention to what's going on will help you along with that. So when I'm working on this car, when I first got it, it had rough paint on it. It had been primered over top of the factory silver color, and it was just rough. It was really a cop job that the guy did to get the car sold, I guess. But the first grits that you're going to use are probably going to be 100 grit or less. And I used 80. That was kind of my go-to to bust down the paint and get it down to bare metal. Occasionally, you know, you might pick up some 36 grit, 40 grit, where things are really rough and you want to knock it down fast. So the other reason that I like 80 is that it busts down body filler at a reasonable rate. You know, I use the 36 grit and the 40 grit maybe on the first start of sanding to knock those high ridges down, and then once it gets kind of close to being all one uniform surface, I'll switch over to the 80 grit to get it blocked down and level out that body filler. And then my primer, it does okay with 80 grit, but it does a lot better with something in the 100 series like 120 or 180. So I'll switch from 80 to 120 or 180 just right before it's finally finished to the point where I'm going to put the primer. That way it takes out those 80 grit scratches. So with that being said, I'm certainly not going to use this 80 grit on the fender, which is where I'm going to start blocking. The grit that I have is 120, which 180, 120 are pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that and knock the peel down. And we'll see how that goes. But if it works pretty well, we'll switch to 220 before primer, because now that we're out of the bodywork stage, the rough bodywork, and we're into block and primer, you know, if I can hit it with some 220 before that next primer coat, that's just going to make the next series of primer and blocking go a lot faster and a lot smoother. The other thing, wear your safety gear. You don't want all this garbage in your lungs. You want to live a long time to enjoy your car well into life. So safety first, right? So another little tip here is before I start, if I've got a section of panel that I'm unsure which block to use, I'll test run it without the paper. And I can see if it's hitting the surface properly, or if maybe I need to switch to a round block to get down in there. But I think this narrow one's going to work just fine. Let's see if we can work that little spot down right there. There we go, that's pretty close. I'm going to stop there on this whole top edge and we'll finish that up with 220. Keep something handy to keep your paper clean. If you start seeing paint gum up on your paper, you've got to keep that clean. Switch your paper, use your brush. If it's getting really gummed up, I've even used a clean brass wire brush to scrape the paper clean and help make that paper last. But if you're getting gummed up spots on your paper and you continue to sand, those gum spots are lifting the paper up off of the surface. And those gum spots are also digging into your surface. So you're kind of defeating the point of block sanding that out by rubbing those gunked up areas into your paint or into your primer. The other thing that I will say is don't put a lot of pressure on your block. If you're putting pressure on your block, you're going to get some uneven pressures onto your surface. And again, you're kind of defeating the purpose of blocking it out to get it level. So what you want to do is use a light pressure. Just let the paper do the cutting. Use your W and your X pattern and make it work by light pressure. So not only do you want to keep your paper clean, but you also want to keep your surface clean as well. Wipe that dust off. It'll help your sandpaper out a lot, keep things clean. But talking about grits, hopefully you can see this orange peel that I've got in my coating. And all I'm trying to do with this 120 grit is just break that down. See how you can start to see it dimpling through. I'm taking down the high parts of that orange peel, and the light parts, the low parts are still showing up as a darker color. The highs are a little bit of a lighter color. So as soon as that orange peel is starting to disappear and I get to where it's more of a uniform color, a uniform surface, I'm stopping. I'm even stopping a little bit short of that in some places, like on the corners and edges, to again give myself time and primer thickness to be able to cut it one more time with 220 grit sandpaper before I primer this round. It's not turning out too bad. As you guys know, when you start to hit metal, you stop. Got a little bit of body filler coming through over here and some texture issues over the top of the wheel well. Just kind of stopped there, and I think the primer will cover that up. And then, you know, there's going to be a few places where I'm going to put some glaze. For example, around the Trans Am extractor, a little bit along the door edge. I'm going to take a break from the sanding and I'm going to dig in on what I was mentioning earlier. We're going to break out the welder and start cleaning up that little transition right there. Well, let's grind that down and we'll see where we ended up. Might have to put a little more on there. I think that turned out okay. Got a nice contour in there now. A little bit of filler, a little skim coat there to blend that all in, and it should be pretty good. It's better than it was. It's not perfect, but you know, I'm not gonna mess around with this all day. It'll look just fine. So I'm gonna get back to sanding here, and I'll bring you back when I got something to show you. All right, so here's where we ended up. Ended up putting some filler in a few different places, just a little bit of glaze, kind of bring everything up to speed. You know, I'd worked these door gaps with weld to make them just right. You can go back and check that out if you want. And the rest of it back through here, where I replaced the patch panel, this all worked out really good. I just put a little bit of glaze up in here to help tune up that body line. It had a little bit of a wiggle in it, and then a little bit around the marker light just to get that tight, but it's coming right along. But before we spray primer on this, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the grits and just kind of sum everything up for you. My best advice is to follow those rough guidelines. You know, you got to think about it in a few different stages. Your really rough body work, where you're using those really low grits like 80, 100, 120. And then you kind of get into, you know, your mild body work where you're going to be, you know, 120, 180 on up to like 220. That's kind of the middle stage. And then the final stage, you're not really shaping anything. You're just sanding through those scratches. So break it out in your mind into those categories and then just, you know, try it out, see where you're at. So listen, my advice to you with all this sanding and block sanding stuff is just take your time, do some research. You know, I'm just a guy in the garage trying to get this done on my own car. Everything that I'm sharing with you is stuff that I've picked up through my own research and watching videos and reading on the web. So, you know, if you guys do that, take your time, pay attention to what's going on as you're doing it. I'm sure it's going to turn out just fine. You can do this. It's really nothing that's super complicated. You just got to get out there and work. So with all that being said, I'm going to quit babbling at you guys about sandpaper grits. I'm going to get some masking paper on this thing. We're going to get it primed up and I'm going to show you how it turned out. So stick around. Pretty happy with it. Now it's pretty cold in the garage. I was having problems keeping it warm, and I think that's why I got just a little more texture and a little more orange peel than I did on some of the past sprays that I did kind of recently. But I think it's just fine. As far as body work goes, I don't see anything that causes any concern. I've got a little bit of a wiggle in here. I think you can see that. So right in through here, hopefully that'll block out, but nothing that cannot be adjusted in our next process. One thing that I definitely want you guys to think about if you're new at this is read your tech sheets for whatever primer, whatever paint you're putting down. Your tech sheets should tell you everything that you want to know as far as what sanding grit you need to be working toward. In the next video, we're going to work on the bumpers and get those blocks sanded down. That'll be the final video probably of my Enduro repair series on those bumpers. So you'll want to see that. Get caught up if you need to. Go check out the playlist. And lastly, I wanted to mention Kevin Tetz is got a lot of information out there. Paintucation University is a new project that he's been working on. I've seen it on the web and it looks really cool. You can go on there and learn, you know, every step of the process to be able to do this stuff at home. So if you don't know who he is, check him out on the Eastwood channel, and he's got a lot of educational how-to videos, especially one of my favorite is the hands-on cars. He's got a Camaro called Zed Sled that is just wicked. That is one of the cars that you know, I really watched seeing that come together, and it's helped me learn a lot about what I need to do on this car. So listen guys, thanks to each and every one of you. We are just about at 500 subscribers, which I started this thing almost exactly 1 year ago this month. February 2020 was my first video, so it took about 11 months to get to 400 subscribers and about 1 month to get the last 100 that I needed to make that 500 mark. So things are picking up, and it's because of you guys. I really appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by Heavy Pedal Garage. Catch me next time.